Faith in a Modern World, Lent Study Group 2016.
Part 4, One World, Many Faiths. We asked Rowan Williams and Pauline Webb if they know people from other faith communities. They do.
Well, I've been fortunate, really. I, some years ago, began to make friends with some Buddhists and still have a good deal of connection with Buddhists locally. My wife grew up in South India, and we've been back to India and have some experience there locally. We have a large Muslim population in this city, and the school that my daughter attended here was about 20% Muslim. And I've also developed quite a good friendship with one of the rabbis, and have even spoken in the synagogue there. So yes, a fair amount of conversation across those boundaries.
So we have a very fine interfaith centre here in Kilburn, in Wilston, and I go there fairly frequently. I'm a member. And apart from that, I live among people from other faiths. My next door neighbour's a Jew. I've got Hindus living just below me. I've got Muslim friends in the local political party. At one point, they suggested that for our branch, I should be made the secretary for the ethnic minorities, because I was an ethnic minority.
What about multi-faith worship? Joel Edwards has already told us about his passion to work for justice with leaders of other faith communities. Would he also worship with them?
I wouldn't take part in multi-faith worship because I believe that there is a huge difference between standing shoulder to shoulder in what Schaeffer would call co-belligerence for the common good, and as kind of a syncretistic worship where all things get blended together is probably not honest worship, because it is very likely to obscure the distinctives of all the worship traditions.
Two other members of our team agree with Joel, and one disagrees.
I do have a difficulty about multi-faith worship. I like to be with people of other faiths, but I like to be with them on a basis that's honest and true, and in which we all feel comfortable. For example, I believe it's clear that the three Abrahamic faiths, Judaism, Christianity and Islam, are worshipping the same God, though we believe very different things about the way in which that God has made God's nature known to us. I can see that it's possible for a degree of common worship, but the form that suits me the best is common silence, in which we are all in the presence of the sacred reality that we call God.
I'm not too happy about multi-faith worship. I'm never quite sure what we're doing, what the community is that's worshipping. And there are, I think, possibilities of gathering together, each one saying a prayer out of their own tradition, and I don't think that's a waste of time. I'm happier, really, as a Christian, sitting in on someone else's act of worship, with my own agenda, my own reservations, my own adjustments.
The Sunday after September the 11th, we all gathered at the Interfaith Centre, not for worship in that sense, because it was a vigil of silence, except that it was punctuated throughout the hour by people reading just verses from their scriptures. And it was most moving. I mean, it wasn't called interfaith worship, but I was certainly worshipping during it.
What about evangelizing people of other faiths? Should Christians do this, or is it best to live and let live?
It's right for Christians to evangelize anybody, because Christians have a responsibility to tell everyone that there is good news from God through Jesus Christ. But evangelizing in the sense of using every opportunity to make someone from another faith community feel inferior, well, no. Only on the basis of a great deal of honesty and patience and trust can you begin to say, well, actually, this is what I think God has given me to offer. And I'd simply ask you to give your prayer and your mind to that. Relationship comes first.
I think it's right that Christians should share their faith with people of other faiths. I don't mean you've got to sort of set out to convert them by any way you can, but I certainly would share my faith. I would talk about my faith to people of other faiths as I would expect them to talk about their faith to me. I think we share with each other what our faith is.
If someone has come into a radically different life because they met Jesus, because they have found in God the forgiveness of sin and a new lease of life, that they have not only the right but the responsibility to offer that invitation to others. To deny that right, either to a Jew or a Muslim or a Christian, is an act of intolerance.
What can the churches do to combat racism? We asked Joel to draw on his wide experience in working with official bodies on this important issue.
One of the things the church can do is to be a voice in those places, to bring the values of equity, kingdom-type values, a desire for honesty, a desire for transparency, a desire to encourage accountability to these huge institutions. I hope that's one of the things I'm doing by being in those places as an independent advisor, and to see that not just extracurricular activity, but an integral part of my work as a minister of the gospel, as a good news person. I think that's the first thing, to be out there and allow our values to be a part of what is happening within the wider society. But then we also have a challenge, I think, within the church to raise up the icons, to shift the culture of imbalance so that more black and Asian people, more people from ethnic groups, are raised to positions of prominence.
From racism to fundamentalism, is it always as bad as it's painted? Indeed, might Christian fundamentalists have something to teach the rest of the church? The Archbishop and Pauline Webb have striking views on this.
Fundamentalism is one of those words that people throw around when they're looking for an abusive term, really. Sometimes it just means conservative Christians. Sometimes it really does mean people who believe in the absolute literal understanding of every syllable of Scripture. I worry about the absolute literalism over every bit of Scripture. But more broadly, what you might call the conservative evangelical approach, which may or may not be strictly fundamentalist, is a tremendously important presence in the church, chiefly because it's a reminder that Christianity is indeed a relationship to a person before it's anything else. And the overflowing joy and intimacy that the really sort of mature and secure conservative evangelical possesses, I find something I'm colossally grateful for, and I'm always moved and helped by.
I owed my conversion to, apart from the fact that I was brought up in a wonderfully Christian family, but I owed my real personal conversion to the witness of a member of the Plymouth Brethren. I suppose you'd call them fundamentalists, I don't know. But she was very literalist in her view of the Bible. But she taught me to revere the Bible and to take it seriously. One of the things that worries me about a lot of fundamentalists is that I don't think they take the Bible seriously. I went to a real fundamentalist church the other week, actually, where the preacher was preaching on Elijah and the cruse of oil or something. And he was preaching on something that had nothing to do with that passage in its original context or anything. He was using cruse of oil to mean all kinds of things. It had nothing to do with what was in the book. I thought this man is not taking the Bible seriously.
I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me. What do these words of Jesus mean for members of other faiths? Will we find people from other faith communities in heaven?
Well, I believe both that people of other faiths will be found in heaven and that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. I believe that in Jesus, the life of God and the life of humanity, the life of creation, if you like, meet together. He was both human and divine. And therefore, I think that Jesus, if you like, is the bridge by which we can return from our alienation from God into a right relationship with God our Father. In that sense, I think no one comes to the Father except through him. That's the bridge over which we have to cross. But I think that more will come to the Father that have known Christ as Christ in this life.
It is not beyond God's provision, and Romans 1 makes this, I think, a very justifiable claim, that people who have never heard about Jesus, people who have never come into contact with the message as I know it, may, within the context of their own understanding of God, have found the love of God and the security which God has provided for them through Jesus. I would not rule that out as one way in which God may appear and present himself to people. But what I can say with confidence is that, as far as the Bible is concerned, the gateway to heaven, the point of access to heaven, the point of provision, is through Jesus Christ and his cross.
What, if anything, might Christians learn from members of other faith communities? John Polkinghorne speaks for all four contributors.
From our Jewish friends, we can learn the very great importance of family life. Our Islamic friends are people who are very punctilious in the performance of their religious duties, their regular periods of prayer each day, which they're prepared to do in public if they have to do it. I mean, they're not going to go into a corner and try and hide themselves away. These are things that don't always find as full a reflection in the Christian community, and certainly we can learn from them in those sort of respects.
And now, as usual, David Coffey sums up.
Here's a tale of three churches. Church number 1 is in a city of 300,000 people, where 41% of the population are Sikh, Hindu or Muslim. Church number 2 is in a community where there are 4 mosques and 3 Hindu temples. Church number 3 employs a Punjabi evangelist. He and his wife hold services for their Punjabi friends. These snapshots of churches will be familiar to some of you listening to this tape. For others, it may be a picture of mission overseas rather than mission on your doorstep. For all of us, it's an urgent reminder of the challenge of witnessing for Jesus Christ in a pluralist society. This mission challenge brings us closer to the world of the New Testament, for this is the very situation which confronted the early church. The early Christians believed in the uniqueness of Jesus Christ. They fearlessly proclaimed that he was the way, the truth, and the life, and that there is no other name given to us by which we can be saved. The secret of the early church was they did not denounce other faiths. They simply proclaimed Jesus with all the power and persuasion at their disposal. Their lives were Christ-like, loving, and attractive. This is doing God's mission in God's way, and love never fails.